1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 32 through 34. I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife, and his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. Paul, almost in a parenthetical way, says here that married people have divided interest in that they are called not only to please the Lord, but it makes perfect sense and is consistent with the biblical values of marriage that we would seek to please our spouses. And that is the theme of this part of our series, learning how it is that we can please our spouses by meeting their felt needs and desires. And Meredith has been offering challenges to the men from a woman's perspective, helping us husbands to understand what some of the common felt needs and desires are of our wives. And then I'm sharing words of challenge to the wives. So I'm going to ask Meredith to come now and to offer another point of challenge to husbands with regard to pleasing their wives. Give her a hand, Meredith Shepherd.
As Pastor Paul said, I've been giving the challenge to the husbands, and he's been sharing with the wives how they can better meet the deep felt needs of their husbands. Just in a very brief review, the common needs that I have shared that women have from their husbands, number one is affection. That is the ongoing demonstration of love, fondness, warm liking, attachment, closeness, endearment, devotion, kindness, and tenderness. It's demonstrated by words of affirmation, words of appreciation, and words of admiration. So you can express affection to your wife through words. You can also do it through together time. We want to spend time with our husbands, and you show us that we matter to you when you want to hang out with us. Also through gifts, through acts of service, and through physical touch. Another felt need is for communication and conversation. And I said in that message that to communicate verbally, it is best done with kindness, sensitivity, and through active listening. Family commitment helps to enhance our sense of security when we know that our husbands are committed to fatherhood, committed to financial security, and also to your faith in Christ as you continue to grow in the Lord. Today, I want to share a fourth felt need that many women have. And in the interest of time, I'm going to read this scripture because it's a little lengthy, and it's found in Ephesians 5, verses 25 through 33. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loves the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it, just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. For this reason, and this is also a quote from Genesis 2:24, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but and this is Paul talking, he says, I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. How does a husband feed and care for his wife? That's the question I want to lift out of that passage of scripture. How is that done? We feel fed and cared for when you make us a full partner and when you make us your highest priority. And how is that done? It is best done through establishing a we mentality versus an I mentality. Earlier in this series, Pastor Paul and I were talking about the oneness and the unity that we have together as husbands and wives. So we are teammates, we are partners, and if we're on the same team, then we both want to win. It's not like if he wins, then the wife is losing, or for the wife to think, well, if I'm winning, he's losing. No, we want to both win. And when we do what the word says, we are both winning. Husbands, when you do what is in the best interest of your wife, you're winning. And I think a lot of times the world makes you feel like you're losing. Society makes you feel like you're losing. If one person's needs are being met, it's easy to think that if my husband is meeting my need, that he is losing out. But that is a lie from the enemy, and it is also the condition of society and the world. Society is very anti-marriage, and I think it is so pervasive that we don't often realize it. Sometimes when couples are getting married, when the guy has gotten this engagement ring, I've often heard it referred to, and so have you, that it is the world's smallest handcuff. And we just chuckle at that. Now, when you stop and think about it, that's not really funny. It really goes to say what the world thinks about marriage, if that ring is the world's smallest handcuff. And then when a husband is prioritizing his wife, and he's consulting her, and he's checking in with her, his guys, they can be his good friends. They will tease him, checking in, calling the warden. He's under house arrest. See, you're laughing. But now, if you're laughing about that, what does that really say about marriage? What are you saying? What are you communicating to your wife when you call her the warden, or you let your boy call her the warden? So I just want to challenge these areas that we have come to embrace because it's so pervasive in society, so pervasive in the world. We want to squash that. We're not your warden. We're not your mommy. We're not trying to be. But if we're thinking that we are teammates and partners, when you check in, when you are letting your wife know about your whereabouts, what's going on, your schedule, that is showing great respect, and that definitely enhances our sense of security. Amen. So to consult your wife, to check in with her, I've heard that called petticoat government. That's what this man is under, petticoat government, when he checks in with her. But that is not true. We are talking about a man who is esteeming his wife and imparting value and respect to her by checking in with her. And men, we want to be able to trust you. When my husband is gone, I need to know where he is, what he's doing, and I generally do have that sense of what's going on because he has given it to me, not because I've been playing private eye and checking up on him and sneaking around. Who's that? What's that? What you doing? Where you going? I don't have to do that because he makes it very easy for me to trust him by letting me know of his whereabouts. That says to me, I value you as my partner. I esteem you. We are in this together. We are teammates. He's thinking we and not I. That I goes away when you get married. Ideally, it's supposed to. So being secretive, just being closed, it's not necessarily dishonest because something negative is going on, but when you are open and forthcoming and you share with your wife, it definitely enhances our sense of trust and security, and it shows that you esteem us, you value us, you appreciate us as your partner. So you do want to disclose your schedule. If you do a 9-to-5 job, it helps us to know, hey, he's at work, he's out there earning a living. Let me just backtrack a little bit. My husband has made it possible for me to contact him at any time, wherever he is. Now, one of the ways that started was when we had bad cars. In those lean years, when we had unreliable cars, we had cell phones because that was much more affordable than a new car. So that cell phone helped us to know if the car breaks down on the side of the road, we have a way of communicating, contacting one another, contacting AAA. So I've always known where he is, and he's done the same for me. Our children have always had, once they started driving, cell phones. But it's not just that we are this modern family, everybody's got a cell phone or a pager or a beeper. It is enhancing our sense of security and trust. We know that we can reach this man who is the head of our household, the head of our home, the head of our family. I can reach him at all times. Women, I know my challenge is for the men, but I do want to help my sisters at the same time. I don't work that to excess. I don't call him just because I can. I don't pull him out of meetings just to flex a muscle. I got the power. Watch this. I'm going to get him up out that meeting. You know, we're talking about partnership and teammates and win-win, so I don't abuse the powers and the privileges that he entrusts to me. So I would encourage you to do likewise. And another way that a husband can care for and nourish and feed his wife is by making sure she's comfortable with his relationships with the opposite sex. Now, got quiet. I think for a lot of men, because there's nothing going on, it's easy to take a position of just forcing a relationship on your wife. You can trust me with her. I'm not doing anything. I'm married to you. You got the ring on your finger. But no, when you allow her to be able to express any discomfort she may have or any reservations, that will go a very long way towards that win-win relationship, that partnership. When you impart that sense of respect and value, I'm respecting this woman enough where I'm going to allow her the freedom to express any misgivings she has with the women in my life. And that's a challenge. That is a challenge, especially if you know in your heart there's nothing going on. This is a coworker, this is a friend, this is whomever. It is a challenge, but it will greatly lend to the enhancement of your marriage and the strengthening of your marriage, the security of your wife, when you can give her that sense of, Paul has once said that my wife has veto power over all my female relationships. And so that is a way of affording your wife the security that she needs to be the partner that you definitely desire in her. So in closing, again, I want to refer to the scripture. It exhorts men to protect, to care for, and to feed their wives. If you wouldn't think of starving yourself, don't starve your wife of the life-giving nutrients of affection, conversation, family commitment, honesty and openness, and prioritizing her above all your other human relationships.
Now, let's unpack this concept a little more, because Meredith has shared some really powerful points here with gentlemen, and I want to make sure that you don't miss them. This fourth point we termed prioritizing her above other human relationships. And what that means really is your relationship with God ought to be the first and foremost relationship in your life. But second to that, when you are a married man, second only to your relationship with the Lord should be your commitment and holding as the highest human priority your relationship with your wife. Now, this is something that has to be arrived at. It is a commitment, a decision you make that you ask the Lord to bless you to be able to live out throughout the years of your marriage. And in asking the question, what does it take to, in Ephesians 5, Paul said that just as we take care of our own bodies, we ought to nourish and take care of our marriages. And Meredith opened with the question, what would that take? And the answer was to make your wife your full partner and your highest priority in terms of human relationships. One of the things that she talked about was this business of disclosure. Wives tend to feel very insecure when their husbands, I've learned this over the years, and frankly, I've learned some of these lessons the hard way, that they feel very insecure when they feel that you have pushed them off to a corner of your life. There are some things I talk to you about, and there are other things that are just me, and you don't have to worry about them. And there are some men, not you, but other men, who take that attitude. Well, just don't worry about that. Some men are that way about their career and their coworkers and their decisions in their career. Some men are that way about their recreational life. Some men are that way about their social life. And the result is the wife feels pushed off to the corner, and he only wants to deal with me about certain things. But the point Meredith has made here is a point of full partnership where if it pertains to you, it pertains to her. Because we're not two I's, we are a we. We are a team, and we're fully partners. She may not be an expert in your business, but you can share in layman's terms what's going on and how you are. If she has questions, wants to know kind of what you're dealing with. And she would feel respected and partnered with as you make sure she knows that. And then the second point, I'm going to pick up on this in a moment. The second point Meredith made was with regard to this prioritizing her with other relationships with the opposite sex. And she challenged husbands to make sure that your wife gets to input and express her discomfort, any concern or discomfort with other relationships. I'm going to ask Meredith to help men understand something that we often don't understand, which is the whole intuitive kind of feature in many women where they can look at another woman in your life, a coworker, a friend, in your social circle, and you're asking her to be real specific with you about what her problem is with this woman. And I'm going to ask Meredith to just share a little more about how it can't always be reduced to logical ABC kinds of things, but instead there is a very real sense. And because we might not perceive it to be necessarily logical doesn't mean that it's not accurate. And so why don't you share just a bit more about that?
Well, I talked about the fact that women are highly emotionally wired. And a lot of the communicating we do is often nonverbal. We're picking up and sensing things all the time. And I've come to realize that's not a bad thing. It doesn't make a woman now a woman can be suspicious and distrustful and insecure and have lots of issues and baggage. But for the average woman who isn't very deeply issue-laden with tons of baggage, we are intuitive. You just feel things, you pick up things, and sometimes we can watch body language, eye movements, the way a person talks or does not talk, the way this woman... I once told Paul about some of his friends. This is a long time ago, y'all. This is actually when we lived in Pennsylvania before we moved out west. But I was telling Paul about some of the women who were his friends, and I questioned the kinds of friends he had only because when I was around, they didn't even speak to him. So I'm thinking, what's up with your friends? So over a period of time, we were able to discuss that without Paul feeling like I'm just trying to control and manipulate him. And so that's not what we're trying to do. I was actually not just looking out for him. I don't want to sound like I'm just a saint. I'm looking out for you. These are your friends. They're not treating you right. No, I'm also looking out for me too. But at the same time, I wanted to express to him that certain women make me feel uncomfortable. And when a woman who is your friend doesn't even deal with you when I'm around, that's something we want to look at. That's something you may want to evaluate. So it's not just her relationship or lack of with me, but it is also, it says to a woman, what's up with this when she avoids you too? I know the women are feeling me on this, but men, I do want to hear from the brothers. Some bass amens, do you understand that, men? Okay, all right.
Let me pick it up there and talk a little more about that. I'm still going to offer a challenge to the wives, but before I do that, let me share a little bit about my journey about this. I think this is one of the most important areas in terms of retrofitting marriages for men to understand that if your wife is uncomfortable and insecure, you're not going to have a marriage that can stand the storms. You've got to do whatever it takes to bring her to a point of comfort and a point of trust and security. For me, this was quite a journey. I got married and had very much the I mentality. And I had to learn how to begin to even think in we terms. And one of the things I did to express the I-ness was I brought into my marriage all of my female friends, and I now literally dumped them on my wife. Just really dumped them on my wife. The fact that they were platonic made it legit for me, in my mind. Well, you know, these are platonic relationships, but these are my friends, and I had a great social circle and what have you. But there were people in my circle who Meredith just didn't feel comfortable with. And I said, well, you need to really get over it, because yeah, everything's all right. No, you know, there's no problem here. But there was a problem there. The problem was she didn't feel secure, and she didn't feel like a full partner. She felt like she just inherited a bunch of people who didn't necessarily want to hang out with her. They just want to hang out with me. And because I responded by saying, well, you know, I'll be with you later, I'm going to hang out with them, it created a great deal of insecurity that characterized our marriage for a number of years. And I had to learn, as we went through more and more pain in trying to make marriage work, and a lot of intense fellowship. That's a euphemism. Intense fellowship. I got to a point, and this was quite a distance into our marriage. I wish I had learned some of these lessons that we're sharing with you much earlier in our relationship. We'd have been better off. But you learn them when you do, and praise God, better late than never. But I went a good distance in our relationship, just sort of causing her to be insecure because of my lack of wisdom and lack of sensitivity. I finally got to a place where I said, you know what, this needs to be fixed. This is a problem that needs to be fixed. See, husband, if you're the head of the wife, if there's a problem in the marriage, you got to get it fixed. And you got to do whatever you got to do to get it fixed. And I said, listen, I want to make a fresh commitment to you. The commitment I made was that I later came to describe it as the only women in my life, in my inner circle, will be people that you personally sign off on. That if she makes you uncomfortable, she's not in my inner circle. No questions asked. That's just the way it is. If a woman has a special place, a unique role, whether she's a coworker or a social friend or whatever the case might be, she plays that role in my life only at your pleasure. She does not play that role despite how you feel. And that was a decision I arrived at prayerfully because I was just tired of things not working. And I said, so, hey, here's the list of the folk who are currently in my life. Anybody you want to scratch off? Go on and scratch off. And she'll just get relegated out to the outer circle. She will not be in that inner circle without your approval. Then I began, as I would have to hire staff, I began to have Meredith come into the interview process when I would hire any woman who was going to work with me. And Meredith sat there and listened and looked and, you know, was intuitive and all of that. Then come out of the interview and I said, baby, what you think? She said, yeah, she'll work. And then she'd sign off on that. And they all know, anybody who works closely with me knows if she's not happy, you're history. Just pretty much that simple. So, you know, I suggest you act like you know. And because all it takes is a word, just only a word and you're gone. I have a pastor friend of mine, this isn't in my notes, but let me just say it real quick. I have a pastor friend of mine who had an assistant who got a little snooty with his wife one time. And his wife walked into the office and she said, I came to see my husband, but I just want to say one quick thing to you. She said, don't forget that I sleep with your boss. And then she walked on in and went on with her husband. But you know, the reality is, if a husband will learn to honor his wife in that way, it'll create a sense of security. What I learned is that it created a sense of security in my wife that I could have never imagined she needed. But I saw the difference when I began to operate differently. And she later told me, she said, it gave me such a sense of security that I had no real desire to go in and start slicing and dicing your relationships. I just needed to know that I could. I need to know that I can, so that if trouble arises, I know I'm in a power position rather than in a helpless position. Here's the picture I want to paint for you, gentlemen. I learned to create, through our pain and through years of doing it wrong, I learned to create triangular relationships versus L-shaped. Think of a capital L. It has 3 points, if you will. The top, then the bottom base, and then the right base. And for years, I operated with L-shaped relationships where I was that center base. My wife was the top base, but off to the side of my life, apart from her, were these women who had a direct connection with me. And I have a direct connection with Meredith, but she has no direct connection with those women. And that's the way we operated. And I said, hey, you know, everything's legit, so don't worry about it. But she did have a sense of insecurity. Whereas eventually, painfully, I came to develop triangular relationships where in the points of a triangle, all 3 are connected to each other. And the women, if you see any woman in my life, it is because she is connected to my wife. And if she loses that connection or the connection changes, Meredith starts feeling funny about the connection or whatever, then she has but to say, hey, this isn't working for me. And she can either, you know, prescribe a system for us to sit down and talk and straighten things out, or she can just say, I think I'd rather her not be here. And in that case, she's gone. And in this way, we created a real sense of security. So I wanted to just unpack that a little further, gentlemen, and I trust this will prove helpful to you. To the wives, let me make a challenge. One of the common needs, well, we've covered 3 so far, I've challenged wives with. The first was to remain sensitive to your husband's appreciation for your physical attractiveness. The second was respecting him. And then we talked about prioritizing him above your children, your career, and your personal pursuits, making your husband a top priority. The challenge I want to share with you is the word sex, S-E-X. A common felt need and desire for your husband is to have sexual fulfillment in marriage. And so I want to offer a very simple challenge to wives that sex in marriage can be complicated, can need to be worked through, can cause a lot of problems that I couldn't possibly solve and address in a teaching series. But here's the challenge: whatever it's going to take to bring your marriage to sexual wholeness, to first just improvement and eventually to wholeness, I want to challenge wives to honor God and to please your husband by setting some goals toward his sexual fulfillment. The biblical basis is 1 Corinthians 7 and beginning with verse 2. Since there is so much immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and the wife to her husband. The wife's body, watch this, does not belong to her alone, but also to her husband. In the same way, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife. Do not deprive each other, except by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. If you want to please your husband and in so doing honor the Lord, I want to challenge wives to be sensitive to the fact that he needs to find, in the context of his marriage, sexual fulfillment. And that simply means that you are sensitive to the fact that for a married man to make a commitment to live as a morally clean and upright man, he is going to look to you for 100% of his supply of that commodity. I worked hard on how I would express that. That sentence is the product of a lot of work. I said there are going to be folks in the room that I need to do a little bit of hedging with, but I still need to make the point. If he's going to be morally upright and live up to his vows, then he has a reasonable expectation to have you supply that commodity in his life. Here is one of the ways that the enemy loves to wreck marriages. He will cause people to become isolated from one another, upset and angry and resentful. And one of the key ways that he encourages wives to express the isolation and the resentment is to withhold sexual fulfillment in marriage. Consequently, many wives use sex pretty much as a controlling device in their marriages, so that if I really want to express to my husband how upset with him I am, I will put him on lockdown. Put him on lockdown and drive home the point that I'm upset. I will use this as a controlling feature to make my point. Wives, I want to encourage you that you stand at a much better place of credibility when you honor your marriage by failing to do what the world encourages you to do, which is to be manipulative and controlling when it comes to sex in marriage. And by offering yourself to him, honey, I want to be there for you. You put yourself in a place of credibility so that later on when you need to say, honey, I need to speak to you, we need to talk about some issues here, he is much more prone to hear you because he has not been manipulated by someone who is trying to control him by dishonoring what is for him a very real felt need, and what is for him a commitment he made that you've got to help him live up to. See, when a man makes a commitment, when he stands at an altar and says, I'm going to pledge myself to you alone, that is a commitment he is making to you, but he needs to make that with your cooperation. And that's why Paul said, if you noticed in the verses, he said, if you deprive one another for a period of time, let it be by consent. And Paul's thinking, as he expresses here in 1 Corinthians 7, is the only good reason he could see that you would do that would be so that you could give yourself to an extended time of prayer and fasting. And, you know, the old saints, that's the way they prayed and fasted. They'd shut in and shut away. And so there was no, conjugal access. That's old school. I know some new school folk who say, oh, no, I don't fast like that. I don't believe God called me to that kind of fast. But however you fast and pray, whether it is with or without conjugal rights, the point is that if there is any temporary ceasing of sexual activity in the relationship, wife, I want to encourage you that needs to be by consent, according to what the apostle tells us here in 1 Corinthians 7. And he's just making a case for normal marital relations. Now, many of you would say, but you don't understand the circumstances of our marriage. Absolutely true that many marriages are challenged and have a number of issues that need to be worked through. But here's my point. If you will make the commitment to honor him and his need in this area, you will find yourself in a better place of credibility as you go to discuss what are issues maybe that have caused resentment and that sort of thing in your heart. And it certainly needs to be worked through. But again, here's one of the things where Meredith said earlier that the world is anti-marriage, and here's one of the ways that it manifests itself. When a wife begins to use sex as a controlling feature in a marriage, then you're actually setting the stage for your marriage to become more dysfunctional. You don't make it better when you deprive your spouse. You make it worse. You don't drive them to you, you drive them away from you. And of course, that's exactly what the enemy wants. And so what he does is he feeds us rationalizations. Now, just think about this now. When the enemy wants to set people up sexually, what does he do with single people? He tells them they got to have it. Got to have it, got to have it, got to have it. You can't live sexually pure, no way, no how. You need somebody, got to have it. Oh, I'm going to go crazy, I got to have it. And he's driving single people towards sex. What happens when you get married? That same enemy who was encouraging you, you got to have it, you got to fornicate. I don't get it. The Bible's outdated. Nobody can live like that. I've had people, over the years come into my office. Oh, Pastor, we got to get married. Woo, we got to get married. Oh, we got to get married. How soon can we get married? I said, well, you all need to be counseled first. All right, well, let's hurry up. Come on, let's go. Why? Because not only is it the normal, natural drives they're dealing with, but there's this pushing from the spiritual realm. The enemy just making it feel urgent so that you can justify in your mind sin. So what does that same enemy do? Those same two people get married and begin to have conflict. And those same folk who act like they couldn't function without regular sexual activity now come in the same office. And when they came in unmarried, you couldn't get air between them. Hugged up. And now they come in, grab one chair, put it over there, grab one chair, put it over here. And that same enemy is whispering in your ear, don't let him come near you. That man makes you sick. Just the very thought of him touching you is so it's demeaning. It makes you feel less than a person. Same enemy. You got to watch the enemy's agenda. And you'll sit there and see the way the enemy lies is he'll put a little nugget of truth and wrap a lie around it. And the nugget of truth is, yes, you are feeling resentful. Yes, you are. There are some issues you want to work through. Yes, he hasn't been considerate of you in some ways. But remember what we saw earlier in the series. Paul said, you don't return evil for evil. If you feel like you're not being considered, the response, the godly response, is not to be inconsiderate yourself. The godly response is to say, you know what? I'm going to let God help me to show him by my own example that I've made a level of commitment to honor God and to fulfill what Paul calls my marital duty. I used to love reading King James in this passage where it says, render to the husband due benevolence. I remember when we first got married, we would use that language. Say, baby, it's time for some due benevolence. Say, girl, what you doing? I call up on the phone. Well, why don't you come on home? Let's have some due benevolence. We'd act crazy about it. But I love the language of it. Due benevolence. It is a duty, and it is an act of benevolence when you don't feel like it. When you feel disconnected, when you don't feel like you're in sync. And so from an emotional standpoint, you feel withdrawn and alienated from your husband. But Paul said, as an act of love, as an act of fulfilling your duty to him, the wiser thing would be to fulfill that duty and on that basis of credibility to say, honey, I try to take good care of you. I need to teach you some things about how you can take care of my emotional needs. I need to teach you about how you can make our relationship more inviting to me so that sexually we have a much better time because I'm that much more into it. See, if you want to make those kinds of points, you want to make them from a standpoint of credibility. When you are shutting him out, have him on lockdown, he doesn't hear you as well. Haven't you noticed? If you have his attention, it's not the kind of attention you want. You have his anger. You've gotten his pride involved. The same enemy who's telling you you feel demeaned, you don't want him coming near you, goes over to him and says, you don't have to put up with this. You know all those women who would love to accommodate you? Same enemy whispers those things to him. And he's trying to drive a wedge into your marriage. I want to challenge you to make a commitment to sexual fulfillment and to using that as a basis of credibility to honor God, to take care of your husband's needs, and a basis of credibility so that you can show him as you seek to work out your problems in marriage, honey, I'm making a commitment to your most basic felt needs.